Welcome to mediamelanie TV. Today I'm back to talk about the Buccaneers Season 2, Episode 8. It is the Season 2 finale, and it's called She Knows. We heard that actual line of dialogue in this episode when Lizzie drove or took a carriage right to Tintagel after she received the masquerade invitation from Nan, with none other than that earring in the envelope. Nan has been carrying that earring around everywhere. She literally brought it overseas with her when she went to New York. And for her to put it in the envelope to be the big reveal, I thought that was 10 out of 10. And I think my biggest takeaway from this episode is that almost nobody got a happy ending here, except I guess for Paloma, who may end up getting to stay with Guy, and sort of Nan, who was the only one that really had a true smile on her face when this episode ended, even though she is now completely on the run and pregnant with the heir of Tintagel. Now, when the pregnancy announcement first came, I thought, okay, could it be Theo's baby? Is it Guy's baby? Nan seems to be pretty certain it's Theo's baby with the timing of it, but also, how did she keep this secret that she went to a doctor and was pregnant during their honeymoon? And also, that moment when she turned down the alcoholic drink, I think back in episode 6 or 7, I was thinking there was a possibility that she might be expecting. And in fact, we got that confirmation. All season long, I think everybody's been thinking, okay, could there be a pregnancy at play here to end the season? And if so, is it going to be Nan? Is it going to be Lizzie or potentially Paloma? I think it makes the most sense for it to be Nan, of course, because now we have Theo abdicating the title of Duke, which is another thing I did not see coming. That and the reveal of Kit Tintagel. Now, it may have come on a little bit suddenly and maybe a little bit undercooked, but I think that is the whole purpose. And when and if hopefully when we get this renewal news for season 3, it gives us a whole nother story to tell. Not only will this dynamic between Theo and this long lost brother be pretty wild to watch, but also Reed called Kit dangerous. How is he dangerous? And this is something we saw Dowager writing in her letter that she never wanted to have to do. Must have been a pretty hard decision for her to write to the illegitimate son from her cheating husband, which Reed said, hey, you've worked so hard to prevent Theo from knowing that his father was a cheat, and now you're going to do this. I love Reed. I've loved the storyline between Reed and Dowager. And Reed is proving even more than ever to be this moral compass, not only for Dowager, but for Hector. I loved that he called Hector out and brought up shame surrounding Hector's actions. Because at the beginning of this episode, I think we all thought that Nan was the one who was going to leak this because she pretty much said to Lizzie, I'm going to expose you. But in fact, it was Hector in his villain era. I was also shocked that Lizzie accepted this pragmatic proposal of his, but also very happy to see at the end that Hector is not going to be married to Lizzie after all, and Theo and Lizzie making out. I love these two as a couple. And I've got to say, I had my doubts as to whether or not this was the real deal and if they are in fact Endgame. I thought Theo was potentially on the rebound and very upset over everything that happened between he and Nan and Guy. But Theo truly loves her. The fact that Nan said, what is more important to you, this title or love? And Theo chose love and gave up literally everything he's known his entire life for Lizzie. If that's not Endgame, I don't know what is. However, Lizzie has the news about Nan being pregnant with the Tintagel heir. I loved when Nan said to Lizzie, good luck lying to Theo, and she's making the assumption that she will lie to Theo. When she got back with the tears streaming down her face and her and Theo end up kissing, I'm like, okay, Lizzie's not going to say anything, but somebody's got to break the news to Theo. The only people who really know right now are Patty, the only person that Nan could trust. And by the way, that mausoleum scene when they were meeting up, when Nan let her know she was pregnant, that was gorgeous. That overhead shot, the colors in there. Something the show does so well is the cinematography, the set design, the costuming, and this episode is no exception. The masquerade ball was gorgeous. And Patty continues to be such a joy on this show. I love Christina Hendricks. I've loved her ever since Mad Men. And she's had quite a journey herself. I think this season has really leaned into the female empowerment of it all. And I'm here for it. And speaking of that, it's funny because at one point Nan says to Lizzie, it never should have happened like this. This should have been a love story for us girls. But things got very complicated very fast this season, and everybody is ending in a place where they're mourning something. I'll get a little bit more into that shortly, but overall, this episode was messy, emotional, and low-key revolutionary in a few different ways. And let me also just say that going in blind to this show without having read the book or watched the previous series, 10 out of 10 and no regrets. And I know Edith Wharton's novel was unfinished, and I've been asking, okay, no spoilers, no spoilers. But now that season 2 is over, I'm actually asking for all the book readers, all the people who've watched the prior series, drop a comment and let me know. Did Theo abdicate the throne in the book? And was Kit Tintagel a part of this book? Or is this something that they are using beyond the source material? I'm kind of dying to know. And I also do plan on reading this book in between seasons and maybe even watching the prior series as well. And for those who have watched the older series, which one does it better? But seriously, all of these twists hit pretty hard. I did not have any of these things on my bingo card, and I appreciate when a show takes these big swings and does things that are completely out of left field. I was on the edge of my seat for this entire episode, and I thought Nan was the one in her villain era from the way things went from the start, that confrontation between her and Lizzie and all of that dialogue. But as it turns out, Nan was doing all of this to protect her baby. Now, say what you want about Nan. She's done some pretty unsavory things as a whole. And she did save her sister, as Lizzie points out. Yeah, you tell us every 5 minutes how great you are and you saved your sister. But it's actually true. Nan has made decisions for other people besides herself. And now she's doing that again. She is choosing to protect her baby over herself. She chose to protect Jinny over being with her true love guy and forced herself to marry a guy that she knew she wasn't in love with. So she's a very complicated character. And you know what? So isn't Lizzie. And I'm not saying that I condone the cheating of it all. I would have loved to have seen Nan and Guy actually come back together, but the fact that they are indeed still apart and Paloma's hiding that annulment from Guy, it's probably good that she didn't bring it up because Nan basically gave her permission to be Mrs. Guy Thwart. Paloma has been such a fun comic relief this season, along with Josie Tota, who plays Mabel, but all of the little comments she's made about sex has been an ongoing thread. And I like the way that she's integrated into the group now. I also love that Guy's sitting there amongst all of the girls complaining about, what does Nan want? And Paloma's like, well, I'll tell you what she doesn't want, and that's you chasing her on horseback. And then Jinny saying, well, she probably didn't want the 14 letters from you either. And Paloma's like, oh, it was 15. I wasn't sure what to think of Paloma when she was introduced, but obviously it made sense that there was going to be a bigger arc for her. I didn't mind it at all, and I'm very curious to see if her and Guy are going to stay married moving forward. And is there a world where Lizzie doesn't tell Theo about the baby, but maybe tells Guy? And if so, will Guy think that it is potentially his baby? So much going on in this episode, but before I get more into the review, please go ahead, hit the thumbs up on this video, and be sure you are subscribed to my channel. I'm also covering another show that I think you will love if you like the Buccaneers, and that is The Summer I Turned Pretty on Prime Video. It is rife with love triangles, that young adult teen drama sort of feel. Highly recommend. And on the other side of things, some very dark shows in the mix here too, including Dexter Resurrection, which has been such a fun spin-off to talk about, along with a brand new show called The Institute on MGM+. So stick with me for more TV talk, but for now, let's get into the nitty-gritty of the season 2 finale. Some highs from this episode. Nan's liberation. I actually loved seeing her running away with a smile on her face. That was unexpected. A big theme of this episode was liberation. Theo liberating himself from his title, Nan liberating herself from her situation and going on the run to protect her baby. And Theo's abdication. What a major character shift. Now, we did know from the beginning that Theo didn't want a woman who was interested in him for his title and everything that came along with it. By the way, when Lizzie said that line about about, oh, poor you, Nan, having to slum it at this castle, you poor thing. I thought that was really funny. But I think Theo has learned a lot from his experience with Nan, and I'm glad he was able to forgive Guy. But things are still a little bit messy, and I'm imagining things between his mom are going to be somewhat complex. And one of my biggest questions moving into season 3, once Theo realizes that this Kit Tintagel is going to be on the scene, who, by the way, was like riding under the cover of night and darkness, giving bad guy vibes left and right, will Theo regret giving up his title and maybe want it back, especially if he ends up learning about Nan's pregnancy? Now, who's going to end up telling Theo? Will it be Lizzie? Could Patty end up somehow spilling the beans? I don't think it would be Patty, but odds are Lizzie's not going to be able to keep this secret. And technically, Nan said good luck lying to Theo. She didn't say anything about lying to anybody else. So is she going to tell the girl group? Will Guy catch wind of it and somehow let Theo know? This whole pregnancy thing just puts quite a wrench in things. And it also was just surprising for me that Nan actually chose the Duchess life and chose this over her own happiness, but then ran away at the end. And for me, I thought that was just so well done. I also love Nan and Lizzie's confrontation. The tension, the heartbreak, the raw honesty. These girls were definitely throwing some comments at each other. And I don't blame Lizzie for saying any of this, but it is complex, right? Even though Nan told Lizzie she's over Theo, he's not for her, she wants Guy. And Lizzie even said, I would never have even pursued this if I didn't think that you were done with Theo. But that doesn't make it cool with the girl code of it all. I mean, okay, if I'm in the same situation and I'm with my husband and then I'm in love with somebody else and my best friend knows this, I would not be okay if my best friend slept with my husband, even if I was going off with some other guy. Like, sloppy seconds, come on, please. Like, Lizzie had everything ahead of her with Hector, and even though Hector turned out to be maybe not like the best guy, I think Lizzie made quite a choice, because when she called off her wedding, she already knew she didn't want to be Theo's mistress, and this whole abdication wasn't even in play. But when Lizzie's like, you slept with Theo's best friend while your wedding dress was hanging in the room, burn, 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 girl. And you know what? Nan kind of deserved to hear that. And this is not the first time Nan has been thrown insults this season. She also had that confrontation with Guy in Italy, and I don't blame Guy for everything he said to her either. Nan says to Lizzie, you do not get to make more choices here. The next choice is mine. And Lizzie's like, oh, but yet you made all these choices the past year we've all been so supportive of. First it was Theo, then it was Guy. Oh wait, then it was Guy, then it was Theo. I mean, she's not wrong. And she's also owning the guilt and accountability. She's saying, look, I'm sorry, I messed up. Nan never expected this from her best friend, but things got really complicated this season. So my biggest question of all for everybody out there, I love Theo and Lizzie as a couple, but where's everybody's head with the way things landed? Are we supportive and happy Theo and Lizzie will be together? And can they truly be together with Lizzie keeping the fact that Theo's going to be a father to the heir of Tintagel? Now, yes, he did abdicate the title, but have they filled out the paperwork and signed everything over already? Is there still a chance he can come back? And then introducing the whole brother storyline with Kit is going to be wild. And then another question, who's Kit going to end up being with? Because we're not going to introduce another character, and let's face it, he's probably going to be very attractive, without one of these other girls like, oh, hey, new Duke on the scene. What are we going to do now? I mean, could Conchita potentially go there? What about Jinny? It's possible. But this whole Kit's arrival thing, that came completely out of left field. Did anybody see that coming? Unless you read the books and it was in the books, then obviously you probably knew that might happen. But for all of us TV viewers, that was something completely unexpected. Even when Theo went to talk to Dowager, I didn't think that that's what happened. I thought perhaps he was just telling her that, he wants to move forward with Lizzie and maybe try to fight and get a divorce or something like that. But the abdication was something pretty unexpected. And even with Reed saying that Kit is no good here, I love that he continues to be this moral compass, as I've mentioned before, and just the love story between Reed and Dowager, adding in that generational interest, but also keeping them relevant because it turns out it's a big part of the storyline with the whole Kit thing. And I've got to say, Reed did not seem very happy that Dowager didn't tell him the truth. Blanche was not even in there watching Theo make this big announcement. And Reed's like, "Did you watch? What do you think?" And she's like, "Yeah, I couldn't watch. I already knew what was going on." So I think Reed is going to feel probably some sort of sense of betrayal, especially after all the headway that they've made as a couple, with Dowager being able to have stepped away, let Theo sort of do his thing, and they can go do their thing. But now she's going to have to go back to the castle, prepare Kit for this big role. And I'm wondering if that is going to fracture their relationship. I hope not, but at the same time, I kind of think so. Reed is a good guy. I love that he's keeping Hector held accountable, and I love that he's questioning Blanche's decision with this whole Kit situation, given that she worked so hard to keep it a secret, and now here she is having to let the cat out of the bag. Yet another illegitimate child situation happening now. And technically, if Theo and Nan do end up getting divorced, that's going to be an illegitimate child too, but it's still part of the bloodline of the Tintagels. So, like, what is going to happen there? Is this the last we're going to see of Hector? Will he be a part of this? Will he try to exact revenge even more in some way on Theo and Lizzie? And if so, what would that revenge be? He doesn't know about the pregnancy, but if for some reason he caught wind of it, I think that's where he might enter the picture and try to ruin things again. Because you know what? Misery loves company, and Hector is miserable. And I'm not saying what Lizzie did was right. Obviously, it totally sucks having somebody leave you at the altar and publicly humiliate you. But given that Hector's work is so important to him and he got this new cabinet position, he's not held in as high regard as he would have been had this wedding actually happened, or if he had convinced Lizzie to come back to him once again. And honestly, like, kind of a boss move, I guess, for a villain standpoint, for Hector to have done all this to get what he wanted. But ultimately, he's left with nothing. And like I said, everybody is mourning something by the end of this episode, and Hector is mourning the loss of Lizzie. Other bright spots in this episode, again, Patty and Nan in the mausoleum. Nan was whispering a lot in this episode, and I think that lends itself to the fact that she's keeping this big secret, so it makes things feel a little bit more secretive and whispery. But when she's crying and she says to her mom, "I'm carrying the heir of Tintagel and I'm a nobody," and she's asking her mom for advice. Patty says, "Hey, you did the bravest thing that you've ever known when you saved your sister, and now you fight, now you choose yourself." And that message is so important because it also mirrors what Patty has been through this season with her own divorce. And Nan and Patty have more in common now than ever. And I also appreciated that Patty said, "Look, I separated a mother and her daughter 19 years ago, and I do not intend to let that happen again." So love having Patty there in Nan's corner. Interestingly, Nan's biological mother is also expecting a baby. So we've got a lot of babies now. We've got Minnie, we've got Freddie, we've got this heir of Tintagel going, we've got Nell's baby coming on the scene. So a lot of kids happening here, and I'm wondering if they'll age them up potentially for season 3, and we're going to see some cute little like toddler or kindergarten age kids running around. I also want to shout out Mabel. Josie Toda has been such a bright spot, and along with Paloma, a really fun comic relief, especially in this episode. I loved when she goes up to the guys at the masquerade and she's like, "Have you ever seen a shapelier ankle?" And then just grabs the guy and kisses him. And she's like, "Yeah, this confirmed it, not for me." But what I loved the most was the way that they embraced this queer storytelling this season as a whole between Mabel and Honoria, and showing how heartbroken Mabel is that Honoria is gone, but while also encouraging her to go and do it. Like I've been saying, I think they are Endgame. And I also think the saying, "if you love somebody, let them go," really comes into play here for Mabel and Honoria. But then for Mabel to turn this into an opportunity for Conchita, who is not getting the same call she was for matchmaking because obviously family things. The Brittleseas are not in the highest standing right now, especially with Richard gone, killed by the hands of his brother, and then everything that happened with Jinny, who's her sister-in-law. Also, I loved that Conchita invited Jinny to stay. But what I loved the most was Mabel suggesting to Conchita, "Hey, there's a lot more people like me out there." And Mabel said that she's really honed in her ability to see which girls are open to the flirting. But there's a lot of people in the same situation, but it's obviously really hard to meet one another. So the fact that they're going to introduce a queer matchmaking introduction storyline in a show that takes place in the 1870s, I think is such a powerful message. And even if it may not be super realistic for that time, but it all just plays into this whole self-acceptance situation. And something I love about Conchita is that she is there for everybody. And I think this idea of Mabel's is quite brilliant. And perhaps she and Jinny and Mabel will all sort of collaborate on this business together. And that can be a whole new story that we're hearing in season 3 as well. And really, this was an emotional bright spot in a very dark episode, but it's also a hint at a bright new future. In terms of all these hints and the fact that they've left the door open for a season 3 with all of this new storyline, let's say this is the last episode of the series. Would you be satisfied? Did they give us enough to tell enough of a story where they didn't quite wrap it up into a bow ending, but we at least see where everybody ends up, at least for now? Now, that said, as I've been mentioning, Apple isn't one to cancel a lot of shows. In fact, most shows are multi-season, so I am expecting season 3 renewal pretty fast, especially after the articles that have been out there about this show hovering in the top 10 in many different countries and sort of becoming a replacement for Bridgerton. Now, my next question. I have not watched Bridgerton or The Gilded Age. What show would you guys recommend next for me in this same genre? I've never really been one for historical dramas or period pieces, but my friend Jess over at Matt and Jess TV recommended this and was like, hey, if you like The Summer You Turned Pretty, this might be in your wheelhouse. And I watched it, I fell in love with it, and I've been trying to tell everybody who's in this demographic, like, you need to be watching The Buccaneers on Apple TV+. So I think this fits a certain bill for Apple TV, and I think they're going to keep it going. So let's manifest the season 3 renewal news, and as soon as we get more news, I will, of course, be back with another video to share everything that we know. All right, so lows from this episode, and this isn't necessarily a low, it's just a little bit depressing, I guess, that most of the characters, like I said, are mourning or grieving something by the end of this episode. There are just not a lot of happy endings happening here at all. So Nan is going to be mourning her friends, her past, the love of Guy, and what she did have with Theo. But at the same time, that smile she had on her face, I think, is very telling because she did choose herself. And even if it is because she is protecting her baby, the fact that she's making a decision that's tied to her and her body, I love to see that for her character. And I did think that she was in her villain era at the beginning of this episode, how everything went down with Lizzie and with Theo, but knowing that she's a mom and also probably very hormonal, and let's talk about that for a minute. A lot of people criticize Nan's actions and everything that she's done this season, but if she's been pregnant the whole time, I mean, as someone who's had a couple of kids and now I'm at an age where hormones are like still an issue, hormonal is a real thing. So I also imagine some of the choices that she's made were driven by this feeling to protect her baby and also just like the very real hormone aspect of it all. And I'm not making excuses for Nan, but pregnancy changes a person. And again, the moment between Patty and Nan, and when Nan's like, does it always feel like this? And Patty's like, yes, it does always feel like this. But the mother-daughter, the female friends, the empowerment, one of my favorite overall themes of this season and really the series as a whole. And speaking of the female empowerment quickly, the fact that Honoria did go off to France, I loved that because if you're watching The Summer I Turned Pretty, then you probably know Belly has this opportunity to go to Paris, and I'm pretty sure she's gonna turn it down because of her engagement to Jeremiah. So for Honoria to still go, despite the fact that she had a woman who loves her there, I love the way that she's giving herself that freedom. And do I hope that she comes back and her and Mabel are able to reunite? Of course I do. But her going out into the world and living life for herself and not being under the thumb of her terrible mother anymore, I love this for Honoria, and I really hope that we get Mia back on our screens if we do get our 3rd season. So again, we have Nan, she gave up everything, but she kind of found some peace at the end. And I do think that Nan and Paloma probably have the most happy ending of it all because now Paloma can potentially end up staying with Guy because Nan did sort of give her permission. I'm pretty sure Guy is never going to see that annulment paper, although I'm curious to find out if Paloma presents it to him and says, hey, Nan said we can be together and she's rejected you again. Like maybe we should actually give this a go and maybe they end up staying together. I could see that and it doesn't bother me too much. And Paloma does seem like one of the most emotionally intact characters at this juncture of the series. And then there's Lizzie, who is mourning the loss of her friendship with Nan. Even though they are still friends, there's always going to be this rift between them moving forward whenever they do get reunited again. So even though she chose Theo and gets to be with him, she still did lose her best friend and now is tasked with lying to the man she loves that her best friend is pregnant with his baby and the heir. That is a heavy burden to bear. So I kind of think Lizzie's going to be trapped in this cycle of guilt, even though she is able to be with Theo. She's going to have this at the back of her head all the time. I don't know if she's going to be able to keep it to herself. And for that reason, I do think it will come out. She'll let it slip to one of the girls who will let it slip to somebody else. And before we know it, more newspaper headlines. Then we have Theo, who is mourning his title and his legacy, but he doesn't seem to be mourning it too hard because he gets what he wants. He gets the girl, but unbeknownst to him, he's also going to be a father. And because of that and him not knowing, Theo is mourning something that he doesn't even know about yet, but will undoubtedly find out about, I would guess, in season 3. Just that feeling of being oblivious. Now, it's a pretty common trope, the father not knowing about the mother being pregnant. For here, it does add that extra layer of dramatic tension because I think it makes sense for the season to end with a pregnancy. It is literally just what it needs to drive us into the story for another season. And then poor guy. Now I say poor guy, and okay, yeah, he was with his best friend's woman. However, he has tried so hard to get her back. The opening of this episode with him chasing her on horseback, the fact that he's writing her letters and complaining to the group of girls about how he can get through to her. What got me the most was that scene at the masquerade when he's like, Nan, it's me, I love you. And they have that almost kiss. That tore my heartstrings out, and I would imagine Guy is feeling the same way. He does have Paloma to help him get over this, and I think that for that reason, maybe he does end up staying with her because he's like, you know what? I fought as hard as I could, and now Nan is gone. Guy doesn't know about the pregnancy either. Now, let's say he finds out and he thinks it's his baby. Is Guy going to go chase Nan wherever she happens to go in the world? And where is she going to go next? I don't think she'll be safe in New York because that's where everybody will expect. Where is Nan going to go? I pose this question to you because I really don't have any guesses. I don't think it can be New York. I don't think she'll go back to Italy again. What is next for her? Then we have Mabel, who is hardcore mourning Honoria, and as sad as it makes me that they're not together, I love to see the emotion from this character for being so in love with somebody and in her heartbreak era, but doing her best to still be a good friend, be a good sister, and move through this with grace. I thought it was also funny when they were talking about the fact that they didn't reveal a name of Theo's mistress in the paper. And Mabel's like, oh, tell him it's me. I would love that. And they all sort of giggle. I love that the friends are all so into her sexuality now. And Mabel even made it a point when Jinny was like, well, hey, now we know which half of the room you're flirting with. And Mabel said, I can't help it if it's been staring y'all in the face this whole time and you just didn't notice, but the acceptance is something that has just made me so happy this season. And despite the fact that Mabel is mourning Honoria, she's still choosing purpose over pain, and good thing she does have the friends and her sister to lean on at this point. And then we have Jinny, who is mourning basically everything that's happened in her life recently. Her husband abusing her and then institutionalizing her and then locking her up, and then the guilt she must feel for the death of Richard, who of course is one of her best friend's husbands. I'm glad that Conchita and Jinny were able to come around to each other, have that talk, and eat that cake and rekindle their friendship. Again, that has been one of the biggest ongoing themes of this show is female empowerment and friendship. So to see friends continue to come back together after having all of these bad things happen and hurdles makes a lot of sense and really is on brand for the show. And Jinny is also staying supportive in the background, similar to how Conchita is. Now, those two ladies are obviously mourning quite a bit, each for something different, but I love that Conchita still tells Jinny that she's family, they should stay living there. And I hope that Conchita, Mabel, and Jinny are all gonna work on this queer introduction business together. I think that would be a really fun way to propel us and them into more story for another season. And Conchita, she might be mourning the most of all with the loss of Richard. Hey, I am still mourning the loss of Richard. I think they were such a power couple. One of the first love stories we got to experience in this season. Richard was such a wonderful character. I cannot believe he's gone. But at the same time, I give credit to the show for taking this big swing and making this big move to kill off one of the most likable male characters that there are. So Conchita, she is moving through the guild. Luckily, she's got Minnie. And she's got Jinny there with her as well. But the most important thing about Conchita is that she is staying loyal. She's a caretaker. She's still doing her best to try to have the girls stick together, go to the party together. And even though she may not agree with some of the choices that her friends have made, I love that she always supports them wholeheartedly. Then we have Dowager, who is mourning her son giving up the title of Duke and also having to write the letter to a child that her husband had from cheating during their marriage and who apparently is dangerous, according to Reed. Now, if Reed knows that Kit is dangerous, do other people know this as well? Those visuals of him riding in the cover of Darkness on this horse, if that is not giving bad guy vibes, I seriously don't know what is, but I am literally dying for a Kit backstory. Tell me more about Kit Tintagel, please. And also, who is gonna play Kit Tintagel? If I'm just throwing out some random attractive guys of the right age group, I actually wouldn't mind seeing somebody like Leo Woodall enter the scene. I think he's very attractive, and I do see him more as actually a good guy, but for that reason, I would love to see him channel his inner villain and become Kit Tintagel. Who would you like to see play this part? Drop your ultimate Kit Tintagel casting down in the comments. Then we have Hector, who is basically mourning everything at this point, maybe besides his new cabinet appointment, but he's even mourning the fact that his dad is looking at him with shame for what he did. Not to mention he's losing the love of his life, Lizzie. So Hector lost a lot this season. Will we see more of him moving forward? Is he going to go after Theo? What do we all think about the fate of Hector and what is next? Then we have Reed, who is probably mourning the fact that Dowager was not honest with him. And being that he is a moral compass, dishonesty is probably one of those things that he has a very low tolerance for. So I'm curious if he's also going to be mourning the loss of his relationship with Blanche, because now she has to go and dedicate all this time to training up Kit Tintagel when it seemed like they were free to be themselves and have this relationship after all this time. But you know what? Things are never that easy, and nobody got a happy ending, really. So it also tracks that there's going to be more barriers to their relationship as well. Then we have Patty, who is going to be mourning the loss of Nan, who's running away somewhere, who knows where. Will Patty get to see her again? Is Nan going to write her, let her know where she is? And I don't know, maybe the letter gets intercepted and someone goes after Nan. To me, that would seem pretty similar to Jinny, because we've already had one of the sisters literally running away, and now we have the same thing for Nan. And it's funny because Nan even brought it up. She's like, well, do I run away? Because we all saw how well that worked out for Jinny. So for her to actually be running away again, I find interesting and maybe a little bit redundant, because obviously we saw her sister doing the same thing for the sake of her child and the fact that she didn't want to keep being abused by that asshole Seaton. But now that we have somebody on the run, and by the way, the tagline for this season was Kiss, Marry, Run, and that has all wrapped up very nicely now that we know where Nan ended up at the end of the season. Thank goodness Nan had Patty in the first place. She is her protector, her lifeline, and it gives more credence to the fact that even though Patty made the decision to raise Nan as her own daughter and obviously lived with a lot of guilt for doing that, she is momming so hard, and that is one of the most endearing qualities about this character. Let's talk about some of the needle drops from this episode. There were quite a few of them. We had See Red by Swim School, which played as Nan sent the invitations out, including that earring in the envelope. Let It Happen by Gracie Abrams. I think this was probably my favorite. Yes, I was hoping maybe for some Sabrina Carpenter, more Chappell Roan, or some sort of Taylor Swift. However, I was not disappointed with this song by Gracie Abrams, which is called Let It Happen. And that played during Lizzie's pre-ball meltdown. And it was emotionally spiraling, which really matched the tone of this dreamy sort of tension. That was melancholic perfection. The Deep Blue OK by Self Esteem, that played played as Nan ran off into that fog, and that fog played such a great part in creating that atmosphere of her running away. So that song felt very layered and haunting and a very appropriate choice for that moment. Then we had I Can't Imagine by Sharon Van Etten, who I love. Loved her in the Yellow Jacket soundtrack as well. I think she works well with these young adult type of dramas. And finally, Disease by Lady Gaga. I am a big Gaga fan. All in all, I think the soundtrack of the season was fantastic, and actually the algorithms of social media have been delivering me the Buccaneers soundtrack for season 2, so I encourage everyone to go listen to it. I know I'm probably going to be, because I'm mourning the loss of this season of television and now have to wait for Renewal news and a 3rd season, hopefully. And just going over some of the important dialogue and lines from this episode, one of them that really cut the hardest was when Nan said to Lizzie, "Good luck lying to Theo." And then when Nan was asking Lizzie, "You love him, does he love you?" And that bombshell when Lizzie confirmed that Theo actually loves her, which is what hit Nan super hard. When Theo calls Nan his mother and he's like, "When did you become so English keeping this from me?" That really plays into the character journey that Nan has had as a whole. And Theo's not wrong. Nan has embraced this Duchess life wholeheartedly, and now for her to be running away because obviously the announcement didn't go as planned. She was stepping up there, and then all of a sudden, the Duke of Tintagel has an announcement, and Nan didn't even get to make the announcement, which Theo thought was going to have something to do with outing Lizzie or them separating, and Theo was like, "It doesn't have to be like this." But I thought the comparison of Nan to Dowager was actually pretty spot on. Patty telling Nan, "You've done the bravest thing I've ever known." I just love those two together. And when Reed says to Hector that shame hurts worse, oof, that one really got me. And then again, Paloma's line about it's not my dream to be married with a guy who's chasing other women on horseback, and then also to be stuck in a marriage without sex. And then Jinny's like, "Well, isn't that most marriages?" And Paloma's like, "Well, maybe English marriages." So they're still weaving that sexuality thread around Paloma, and makes me think her and Guy probably going to be getting together again at some point early in season 3. Biggest questions heading into the 3rd season, should we get one, and I hope we do. Who, if anybody, will end up telling Theo the truth that he is a father? Is Nan going to find it within herself to maybe write him a letter and do the right thing? Is Lizzie going to let it out of the bag, or will she tell one of the girls, who again will maybe snowball into a gossip situation? And who knows, I mean, could it end up in the papers at some point? Or is there also still room for Lizzie to maybe be pregnant, and then that will distract Theo? But at that point, Lizzie's going to be pregnant. Will that make her feel hormonal and guilty about keeping the secret? Also, would that be too many babies? Let me know in the comments. Lots of questions surrounding Kit Tintagel. Who is going to play him? How is he dangerous? Is he going to be a good duke? Which one of the girls is going to pursue him? Because I've got to imagine somebody will. And most importantly, is Nan going to end up returning after all, or is she gone for good? Now, they're not going to write Nan out of the show. She's the main character. Where is she going to be at the start of season 3? She doesn't really have anybody else in her life that she trusts besides her mom. So I don't know, maybe she'll run to Nell and Arthur. But if they're in New York, again, that seems like too obvious of a place for her to go, because that is exactly where Theo would expect her to be. Now, when Dowager finds out about this pregnancy, she's going to have some major regrets and be mourning the fact that she invited Kit on the scene in the first place, because obviously that was not her first choice whatsoever. And Dowager finding out about the pregnancy could actually have even more consequences than Theo finding out himself. Because we know Dowager's got the power to send people after Nan, and Nan's biggest concern has been protecting this baby. And will she be able to protect the baby from Dowager if she does find out? During this episode, Nan said something like, "This should have been a love story about all of us girls," but now there is quite a rift between Lizzie and Nan and their friendship. So will Nan and Lizzie find a way to come back together? Will there be maybe some letter writing at some point? I would imagine if Nan truly is going into hiding, she's not going to be communicating with anybody. But I also just wonder, is she going to be able to let all of these relationships and friendships just go? How is she going to fare just being on her own, I've got a lot of questions about the fate of Nan. And again, for all of you book readers, or if you watched the last series, let me know in the comments if this adaptation is following that other series or the book. I'm really curious to know how closely they stuck to the source material and if they've already completed telling the story in Edith Wharton's novel, because yes, it was unfinished and now they're extrapolating and creating a universe besides what is in the book. And also, which series did you like better if you watched both of them? And how did they differ and how were they similar? I think I'm just gonna have to read the book for myself, but for once I am saying, okay, drop some spoilers in the comments. We're at the end of the season and that's fine by me. But for any of you out there who may not want those spoilers, I warn you that those could potentially be in the comments because I am indeed asking for them. Now, final thoughts. This was definitely not anything close to a fairy tale ending. It was pretty unhinged, but in the best way possible. My final rating on the season, I'm gonna go 8.5. I think it was solid. I know there's a lot of talk out there within the fandom of people, oh, I'm gonna stop watching because of XYZ. I appreciate all of the drama, all of the tension, every single ounce of scandal. That's what TV is made for. And this is a romantic historical drama. I mean, we have to have all of these layers of tension and crazy relationships because otherwise it wouldn't be entertaining. I like that they didn't give us this tidy finale. I like it messy. And it's a little bit of this bittersweet feminist reset. And it's funny because I'm always the person out there who's like, oh, I like a bow ending. Again, more for series finale than season finales. But I mean, this could be the series finale. We don't know for sure yet. Hopefully not. But sometimes it's good to embrace the messy. And I appreciate that this show has done just that this season. What did you guys think about the finale, about season 2 as a whole? Who is ready for season 3? And again, be sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel because I will be back to bring you all of the Buccaneers news once it drops, once we get that season 3 confirmation, some casting news. And again, also let me know who you would like to see play this dangerous Kit Tintagel. I am intrigued. And I also just want to thank everybody who's tuned in with me here for the Buccaneers Season 2 coverage. This show is so much fun to talk about, and here I am now mourning my weekly video. So again, I will be back with more coverage on the Buccaneers once we get more news, but in the meantime, stick with me for more TV talk. Like I said, The Summer I Turned Pretty is in its 3rd and final season on Prime Video. It's also based on books, so if you haven't read the books, if you haven't watched the show, get on it, watch season 1. I think that you might enjoy it. And if you're into the dark side of things, The Institute on MGM Plus, it is giving Stranger Things a little bit of School Spirits vibes. And it's based on a Stephen King novel, and the show feels very Stephen King. Finally, Dexter Resurrection. I am loving this spinoff so far. I was not a huge fan of New Blood. I liked Original Sin better than that, but I feel like we're back to our Dexter roots. So if you've been questioning whether or not to watch it, this is me saying, yes, you absolutely should. I am on this journey to become a full-time content creator, and every single time that you watch, you like, when you subscribe, when you comment, it all helps me get one step closer, and I cannot tell you how grateful I am for all of you being here. So, I'll be back again soon. Media Melanie, clicking off.